Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Ben on Sports. And as you can tell from the lovely background of the screen, we have a basketball episode, and everybody can guess what it is, most likely due to the day it's coming out. It is the March Madness special episode I've been promising everybody, overlooking the 2025 NCAA tournament, giving some predictions, giving some opinions. I hope you guys are ready. Sorry, this is coming out really late Wednesday night, early Thursday morning. I wanted to wait and see what happened in the first four games before I got this out, because I do think the winners of the first four games matter, especially those 11 seed matchups when you are looking at the bracket. So now that those are over, I'm going to record this super late Wednesday night and try and get it out early Thursday morning to give people as much time as possible if you want to take my advice in your bracket. So without further ado, let's get into it. So here you go. I have just some history, right? I'm a big history and math guy. I like to think I have a lot of sports knowledge, as you guys have probably learned by now. But I also really like to look at math and statistics because I think a lot of times they can give you trends and tell you a lot of things. They aren't always proven true, but it's not always a bad idea to play the percentages. So I'm going to start with all-time statistics and then get into some recent stats and facts. So here you can see for the first round, just plain and simple, all of the upsets. I don't count 8, 9 seeds as upsets because they're essentially the same seed. And the 9 seed actually wins more often, but those are really meant to be toss-up games. And then 7 over 10, some people don't count as an upset. I'm not going to necessarily count it for now. Usually when the common knowledge is when you're talking about an upset, it means there's at least a five number difference in seeding. So it would be 6, 11, 5, 12, right? Anything that's 5 or more between the seeds. So even the 7, 10 seed doesn't necessarily count as an upset, although some would consider it. But as you can see, 10 seeds beat 7 seeds 38.7% of the time. That's a good margin, and that percentage-wise means you're going to see at least one every year, at least according to the math. Some years you're going to be seeing 2. 11 seed over 6 seed is very similar. The 11 seed actually beats the 6 seed more than 10 seeds beat 7 seeds. So keep an eye about that. And we get into it a little bit later. I think there's some 11 seeds that I like better than 10 seeds to make runs. But as I said, talk about that later when I actually get into the bracket overlook. But they're almost firing off at 40%. 11 seeds are knocking off 6 seeds at almost 40%. It's a pretty high number for an upset. And then if you go again off of common knowledge, the second most common upset is just the next seed line up and the next seed line down. 12 over 5 in the first round happens 35% of the time, which again is good enough for more than one tournament. So one year, 2 next year, 1, you kind of trade off, but 35% is a pretty high percentage. And essentially, if that trend continues, it means you're guaranteed for at least 1 a year, some years hitting 2. So maybe keep an eye out for some 12 seeds this year because the math says it's probably going to happen. 13 seeds over 4 seeds, 21% of the time. Now, this is not quite once a tournament because you got to think there's 4 games every tournament. So one time a tournament is 25%, 2 times is 50%, so forth and so on. So this is 21%, which is just under one time a tournament. But I will also say there's some recent trends and recent things that happen that it's essentially almost every single year. Back when the NCAA tournament first expanded in the 1980s to 64 teams, and I know it's 68 now, but the math still works out the same. That's what all these stats are based off of. And in the 80s and 90s, I think there was a few less upsets. I think they're a little bit more commonplace now for whatever reason. Maybe guys aren't staying in college as long as they used to, so experienced teams beat some more talented but younger teams. Maybe there's an argument there, but I say all that to say, while 13 and 4 seeds historically don't happen once a year, I feel like it's commonplace where they're essentially happening once a year anyway, and they have been happening a lot recently. Look out. There's a couple of 13 seeds I like. The next 3 upsets are the ones that are the most rare. 14 seeds over 3 seeds. There was one last year, right? I don't know if I see one happening this year. There's a couple of good 14 seeds. It is March, anything can happen, but 14 seeds over 3 seeds, a lot more rare. So when you're looking at your bracket and trying to pick upsets, keep that in mind. And then obviously 15 seeds over 2 seeds really hasn't happened a whole lot. There is some interesting recent history, but historically speaking, there's not a lot of 15 seeds over 2 seeds. And then 16 seeds over 1 seed has only happened 1% of the time. And since the 80s, it's only happened twice, although both times have been very recent history, with UMBC over Virginia and Fairleigh Dickinson over Purdue, and all of that has happened within the last 6 years. So maybe it's becoming a more common thing. It's still incredibly rare. There's a reason teams are 1 seeds, and there's a reason teams are 16 seeds. Moving on to the second round, I figure, upset teams win in the first round, and there's upsets in the second round. What's the numbers on the second round? Well, a 7 or 10 seed, if you know how the bracket is set up, the winner of 7-10 plays 2-15. The most common second round upset is the winner of the 7-10 game upsetting the 2 seed. It has happened 46 times under this format, which is good for 1.2 times a year, which means mathematically speaking, if you're looking at your bracket, thinking about upsets, thinking about who you like, you should probably have at least one 7 or 10 seed beating a 2 seed in the second round, maybe even 2. Last time I looked at, well, not last time, I literally looked at the numbers not too long before I recorded this. It's becoming even more and more common, and that number is slowly continuing to climb. So I would figure out what 7 or 10 seed, or maybe both you like, and choose 1 or 2 to upset a 2 seed, because it is very common that it happens. 8 or 9 seed over a 1 seed. There's sometimes some very good 8 or 9 seeds, some very tough 8 or 9 seeds, and sometimes those seeds maybe have an injury that caused them to have a rough patch, and then they're there. Sometimes these 8 or 9 teams can be underseeded, and they've beaten the 1 seed in the second round 21 times, which is good for 0.54 a year, or really once every other year. There was no 8 or 9 seed that upset a 1 seed last year. Maybe it happens this year. The math would suggest it, although the 4 1 seeds this year certainly seem to be almost too strong in a sense to allow that to happen. 11 seed over a 3 seed has happened 20 times, good enough for 0.5 per year, just one less time than the 8 or 9 over 1. Otherwise, once every other year, just like the last one. And remember, there's not as many second round options because the majority of the time the higher seeds are winning, and most of the higher seeds are not separated by 5 whole seed lines. In fact, in the second round, if the high seeds win, the only seeds that you see are the 1 over 8-9 and 2 over 7-10, because those are the places, but the 3 is supposed to play the 6, the 4 plays the 5, and so forth and so on. So there's not as many opportunities to see upsets with some of the higher seeds, which is why there's been more occurrences of these top 2 or 3 options. Just, it's really a numbers game. And then the last one I have here is a 12 seed over a 4 seed. It has happened 13 times, or good enough for 0.33 or 1/3 per year, meaning every 3 years a 12 seed beats a 4 seed and makes it into the Sweet 16. I didn't do a whole lot of math on the 3rd, 4th, 5th, whatever you want to say, how rounds. I mean, there's only 6 rounds and then the champion is crowned, but it's happened so few times, and compared to how many games are and how many tournaments there's been, that the math really, it's so low. Wouldn't really be saying anything, right? So I left it there. The numbers are out there. You can find them pretty easily, but these are the most prevalent upsets and the occurrences that they happen in the first and second round. So maybe if you haven't filled out your bracket or you want to make some last minute changes, definitely keep an eye on making sure you have some of these upsets, or even not too many, based on historical data. Some other important long-time historical data. A double-digit seed, meaning a 10 to a 16 seed, has advanced to the second weekend 16 seasons in a row, and 37 of the 39 seasons under this 64-team format. Again, normally it's coming in the form of a 10 or 11 seed. So really, really pay attention to those 10 or 11 seeds, especially because some of the most famous Cinderella runs of all time come from that 10 or 11 seed making a run. You pretty much, and again, the history dictates it, probably should have one in your Sweet 16 Elite 8 based off of historical data. Again, I was talking about some of the most famous runs of all time. You have the George Mason in 06, the VCU run not long after, and then even recently as NC State making the Final Four run last year. It happens frequently. Somebody is 90% going to do it. Who is it going to be? If you can find out that answer, you're probably going to be in a better shape than most others. Only 3 times this century has a 2 seed. Or only 3 times a century, every single 2 seed has made the second weekend. The second weekend is obviously the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8, so it only takes 2 wins. And those 3 times were 2009, 2019, and just last year at 2024. So in recent history, 21st century history, well, kind of recent history, we're already a quarter of the way through this century. So I guess early 2000s and really most of 2000s isn't that recent, but 2009, 2019, 24, it certainly seems to me that it's highly likely, and this goes back to the math I was talking about earlier with 10 seeds and 11 seeds being really good, that a 2 seed is most likely not going to make a run. Not all of the 2 seeds are going to make a run to that second weekend or the Sweet 16. It's highly likely at least one of them, if not 2 of them, lose. 2 seeds haven't been as much of a sure thing as 1 seeds have been historically. And I guess that's how it's supposed to be, right? Their route isn't supposed to be as easy. And then the last piece, this is a fun number that I got directly from the NCAA, actually. An average of 8.5 upsets per year. Not in the first round, not in the second round, total. And again, upsets is defined by a seed that is a seed difference of at least 5. So, in other words, a 4 seed beating a 1 seed isn't viewed as a massive upset because those 4 or 5 seed teams are usually pretty good and usually the spread is decently close. So, again, average of 8.5 big upsets per year of teams at least separated by 5 seeds. That's really not that much when you think about it. Once you take into account 1 or 2, higher seeds making a Sweet 16 run, that's already 4. 3 or 4 of your 8.5 upsets, and then a couple first rounds, maybe another team making the second round. So there's really not as many upsets. So when you're picking your brackets, the historical data suggests that you need to be careful picking too many upsets, unless you don't care about being right? Because it's fun to believe in the underdog. It's fun to believe in the upsets. Historical data suggests while they are very memorable runs, they are not nearly as likely as people like to think. So here's some more recent numbers, right? College sports have really changed a lot, obviously just in the last 5 years, but even in the last 10 to 15 years, they've changed a whole bunch. So let's look at some of the more recent stats. One First Four team, since the First Four was introduced 13 tournaments ago, it'll be 14 years ago, one First Four team has reached the second weekend. Again, second weekend is the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. 12 of 13, so all but one tournament, a First Four team has made a deep run. And if you need help remembering what a First Four team is, those are the games that happened Tuesday and Wednesday night, and that's not coming from the 16 seeds. It's usually it's every single time come from the 11 seeds. So the 2 11 seeds that have played in the First Four and won are Xavier and North Carolina. It's pretty good idea to think one of those teams, potentially even both of them, are making a Sweet 16 run. Which one do you think it's going to be? Or do you think both are going to do it? Let me know in the comments right now. Pause the video, go in the comments. Let me know which one of those teams you think is more likely to make a deep run, North Carolina or Xavier. Because, again, I'm a big math guy. Certainly seems like one of them is going to. A top 4 seed has lost in the first round in 15 of 16 tournaments. So out of all the 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeds, the highest 4 seeds you can be, the best 16 teams in the tournament, in theory. The last 15 of the last 16 years, at least one of them has lost, meaning at least one quite large upset in the first round. I think we might see multiple this season. It's definitely a very likely scenario, and I'm going to talk about the teams I like to do it in a little bit. But I would definitely be looking at, really your money line, your money there is going to be found at the 4-13 matchups is where I would suggest to look. Maybe a 3-14. If a 16 beats a 1 or 15 beats a 2, I still think they're rare enough where you kind of just have to cut your losses and say, I guess my bracket is ruined. But I would definitely, if you're trying to pick the top 4 seed that loses, look at the 4-13 lines. Those upsets are more common than you might think. Now, I was talking about 15 seeds, right? And I just talked about how it's always unlikely and have said all this stuff about 15 seeds over 2 seeds being rare. A 15 seed has made the second weekend of the tournament, meaning the Sweet 16, 3 of the last 4 years. Who can name them? Obviously, arguably the most memorable one, the only 15 seed to ever make the Elite Eight, St. Peter's in the 2022 tournament. We had Yale make a second weekend run just last year. So I've been talking about all of these mathematical things and how, maybe you don't want to put a whole lot of hope into a 15 seed. But the recent data suggests the 3 out of the last 4 years, again, Oral Roberts in 2021, St. Peter's in 2022, and it wasn't Yale, it was Princeton. Yale did win last year, but they didn't make it. Apologize, it was Princeton. I realized that after I said it. So Oral Roberts, St. Peter's, and Princeton, 3 of the last 4 years, made the Sweet 16 as a 15. So clearly it's more and more common. And another time it happened was 2013 with Florida Gulf Coast, the Dunk City Florida Gulf Coast team. So clearly it's becoming more and more common. Maybe, just maybe, there's a world where as a college basketball society, we need to start predicting these 15 seed upsets. And it appears to happen where when the 15 seed wins, they do pretty well and at least make it to the Sweet 16. I don't know. Maybe that's something to look out for. Maybe it's a recent trend. Historical data suggests otherwise, but the extremely recent trend seems to say there's going to be at least one 15 seed. I'll try and take a guess at it. I don't know. That's a really hard thing to predict. An 11 seed, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that first 4 team I was talking about. An 11 seed has made the second weekend in 8 of the last 10 tournaments. Again, really 11 seeds have a tendency to do really, really well, especially after playing in the first 4. You're almost doing malpractice if you don't have an 11 seed, at least one of them making a run, whether it's first 4 or not. And of those 11 seeds, 8 out of the last 10 tournaments, 6 of them have made the Final 4, including 3 since 2018. So 11 seeds might be the most important prediction you make in your bracket. Obviously, getting the national champion correct is important, but figuring out what 11 seed is going to make a run, because it seems like it happens every year, is going to be just as important. Some brackets have bonuses for getting upset picks right, but you also don't want to pick a 2 or a 3 seed to beat that 11 seed in the second and third round, and then that 11 seed takes out one of your Final 4 contenders. So really study up on those 11 seeds is my recommendation to everybody in a competitive bracket challenge. At least 2 teams seeded 6th or worse have made the Elite 8 in 7 of the last 8 tournaments, including 4 in a row. This is another recent trend. It happened way back in the day, but it's become incredibly common as of late to get one of those not as obvious title contenders, or maybe one of those smaller schools, one of the lower seeds that's hot at the right time, seem to always be making a run to the Elite 8 final and potentially even the Final 4. Again, I'm going to beat this point like a dead horse. Recent history is suggesting it. The statistics are suggesting it's common. You should probably do some research and look into adding it into your own bracket. And then the last piece of recent history, one team seeded 7th or worse has reached the Final 4 in 10 of the last 11 tournaments. See, the last one was 2 teams seeded 6th or worse making the Elite 8. So you need to find 2 teams. But one team seeded 7th or worse has reached the Final 4 in 10 of the last 11 tournaments. Who is that team going to be this year? I feel good that I have a couple of guesses. Let me hear your predictions. What team seeded 6th, 7th, or worse do you think can make an Elite 8 or Final 4 run? And what team, not just do you think, what team is going to be the team that does it? Let me know in the comments. I want to hear from you guys. Who do you like to make a deep run that is a higher seed? Most likely upsets and sleepers in the way I see it. So I have all the upset candidates marked out. I did some research into the teams, all the teams' style of play. And I mean, obviously, the 11 and 12 seeds, I think all four of them have a legitimate shot. UNC over Ole Miss, that could very well happen. UNC is actually favored in the game at time of recording. Xavier over Illinois. Xavier, I think, has been playing much hotter. Just came off a big win over Texas, a big come from behind victory. Illinois has been up and down at the end of the season. That's very well potential. Drake, an elite mid-major team, maybe the best mid-major team in the country this year, over a Missouri team, another Missouri team that has had some really good wins, but I also think they have some bad losses. And they had a stretch where they were playing like a top 4 seed, and I don't think they're there, but they, you know, you never know what some rest and recuperation can do for a team going into the tournament. And then VCU, in the second or third best mid-major team to me, not including some of those West Coast schools, because I don't view Gonzaga or St. Mary's as mid-majors anymore. But VCU, another one of the top mid-major teams, over BYU. And now I really, really like BYU as a 6 seed, but VCU is also really, really good. I feel like that's kind of unfair for both of those teams because both of them, I think, would excel in different matchups. But that one could be a really fun, close one as well. And then all of my 12 seeds, like I said, all my 12 seeds are there. Maybe the best mid-major conference team this season, at least their analytics darlings. All of the advanced analytics love UC San Diego. Very, very good team in their first year of Division One NCAA tournament Division One eligibility. Michigan needs to be careful. Michigan can't get loose with the ball, or I think they're going down. McNeese State, Will Wade definitely has some NCAA tournament experience. He has McNeese State going well. They almost knocked somebody. I forget who it was. McNeese State almost had a big upset last year in the first round under Will Wade. This feels like Will Wade's last hurrah with the news about him going to NC State. Can they knock off a Clemson team under Brad Brownell, who just signed a big extension, made the Elite Eight last year, and seems like they are getting better and better and consistently a basketball power? Let's find out. Mountain West champion Colorado State over Memphis. I don't like the Mountain West. More on that later. If you look at my Twitter, you'll see that I think they're habitually overrated. Sorry to my Mountain West fans. And then Memphis, I think, got way overseeded. They have some good wins. They also have some bad losses, in my opinion. Memphis is a good team, but Colorado State is also a good team. They're arguably the hottest team in the country. I definitely see the potential for an upside there. In Liberty, Oregon and Dana Altman, not new to March Madness at all. Dana Altman has a Final Four run or two in his career at Oregon. But here's why I think Liberty can beat a lot of teams that it shouldn't. It's usually one of the few recipes for dealing out an upset. Not the only one, but it's a pretty good one. The 3-point line. Liberty is arguably the best 3-point shooting team in the country. A hot day from the 3-point line, and I see the Ducks going back to Eugene without an NCAA tournament win. 13 seeds over my 4 seeds. Here are the ones that I think can feasibly do it. Yale, they did it last year. That team's pretty darn good. It's not easy to be a 13 seed as an Ivy League team. And Texas A&M doesn't shoot free throws well, which can be a recipe for disaster and upsets. And I think when they're not, I think sometimes they can turn the ball over and struggle to rebound. So if you're giving teams extra possessions with turnovers and offensive rebounds, and you're not making your free throws, that's a recipe for disaster. No matter who you're playing, depending on which Texas A&M team shows up, Yale could be in a great position to complete the 13 over 4 upset. Akron, those MAC teams are usually pretty good. I look for Akron to be competitive in this one with Arizona. I'm literally looking at it and couldn't remember. I think Arizona might be a little bit too good, but these 13s, I don't feel like I can ever say a 13 seed has no chance. Grand Canyon, I think Grand Canyon is playing the best 4 seed. I would argue Maryland is actually underseeded. They're an elite defensive team, and they know what they're doing on offense. They have enough guys that can score. I still think the strength of the team is the defense. Grand Canyon, really good offensive team. I don't think they're going to get enough stops, and I think Maryland is so good defensively that Grand Canyon isn't going to be able to score enough. I feel like for Grand Canyon, a mountain upset, they're going to have to outscore a team. And with Maryland being so good defensively, I don't see it happening. It's not impossible. Grand Canyon, I think, is the best 13 seed. I think they're better than all of these teams. I just think they got bad luck with an underseeded Maryland team. And then High Point, I think, is the second best team here. High Point's really good. If I'm Purdue, I am absolutely terrified of this High Point team. And I 100% think that High Point has something for Purdue. They've been one of the best low major teams all season. There's a reason why they're a 13 seed. Look out, Purdue. And then 14 seeds. I did leave one off the list. I'm not going to talk about these guys as much. Texas Tech has been a top 10 team the last month and a half of the season. But UNCW is really good. I think they play in an underloved conference. The Colonial Athletic Association, where they play the CAA, is really fun. A lot of East Coast teams that are good at basketball, some great programs. College of Charleston has been a great program. Obviously, their head coach left this year, went to Louisville, and look what he's done with Louisville. UNCW is always good and always near the top, fighting for a berth. Delaware has had some good years. This year wasn't good. They still almost made the tournament. Towson is always good. They have a lot of good mid-major, low-major programs in that conference that can always seem to usually play teams pretty close and are always a threat to make noise in March Madness. UNCW is no different this year. Lipscomb, they're no stranger to March Madness. I'm not saying they go every year, but they've been enough recently out of the ASUN where that program is going to feel confident. And if there's one thing Lipscomb can do, they got shooters. They got 3 or 4 guys on their team that can light it up individually from the 3-point line. Iowa State missing their first or second best player. You know, the guy leads the team in minutes, second in the team in points, first on the team in assists. One thing I do think of Iowa State is that I don't think they rely on one person too heavily. I think they are a very, very good team. They embody a team. They embody effort. And I think that losing somebody that magnitude will hurt an Iowa State less than it would hurt some other teams just because of the way they play basketball and their philosophy. But it still is going to weaken them some. They're really good defensively, but if Lipscomb gets hot from the 3-point line, just like a Liberty over Oregon situation, I think it could happen. And Troy over Kentucky. Kentucky's always on upset watch. I know they don't have Calipari anymore. They're still an upset watch team to me. It wouldn't be the first time they got massively upset this year. Wouldn't be the first time they got massively upset in recent memory. Keep an eye on that Troy versus Kentucky game. Now, here's potential sleepers. I listed them, the difference between high seeds and low seeds here. You can see my high seeds. I don't count 1 or 2 seeds as sleepers because there's 1 and 2 seeds, right? So the high seeds are 3, 4, and 5 seeds, and then the low seeds are 6 through 16 seeds that I think can make some noise in this tournament. My number 1 high seed that I think is a sleeper, Maryland. Again, really, really good defensive metrics. They're still pretty good offensively, and they're in a section of the bracket where they could really make some noise. I don't think they're in the hardest quadrant by any stretch of the imagination. And I think if they get by Florida in the Sweet 16 in that 4-1 matchup, they're going to be in the Final Four. I firmly believe that. I feel somewhat confident in that Grand Canyon game. And even the 5 seed, I think they have the weakest 5 seed, and I think they're the strongest 4 seed. So that's only fueling my belief that Maryland is primed to make a run. Again, that Florida team has been really, really good all year. They're really, really good offensively, and I would really love to see that high-powered offense versus high-powered defense in Maryland and Florida. Texas Tech has been playing as a top 10 team. I think they're underseeded. I think they're another very good defensive team, and they might be the best 3-point shooting team in the country. Texas Tech has shooters all over the court. They have shooters sitting on their bench. They have shooters in the locker room. They have shooters in the bathroom. Anytime a Texas Tech player steps on the floor, expect them to be able to make a 3. You play good defense and you make 3s, it's going to be hard. You're going to make it hard on any team, even a Duke or an Auburn. Look out for Texas Tech. Clemson, they're experienced. All but really one important core player from that Elite 8 team is on the roster. The coach has experience. Most of the players have experience. They can slow it down and battle with you inside. They can speed it up and get going in transition. They can shoot. I don't think they have any glaring weaknesses. I don't think that they have any strengths that are top 10 in the country, but I think they are a very balanced, very good team. And I think that balance and having no weaknesses can be very hard to beat in March because they can win in such a variety of ways where other teams may not necessarily be able to do that. Look out for Clemson, even though I think the committee might have given them the hardest 12 seed matchup in the first round. Arizona is Arizona. I feel like for Arizona, they either make a deep run or they get upset and lose to somebody they shouldn't. Last year, of course, losing to Clemson in the Sweet 16. And they still have a lot of pieces from that team. They obviously have a proven NCAA tournament player, Caleb Love, even if it does feel like he's either going 2 for 20 or 10 for 11. What Caleb Love shows up will be important, but they still have pieces all over the court. Can this Arizona team that was outside of the top 25 for a good portion of the year get hot going into the tournament? I don't know if they got hot in the Big 12 tournament, but can they get hot in game one and carry it through to make a deep run? I definitely think it's possible. And then Texas A&M. I'm taking a risk here. I really like Texas A&M, but I think they're a little bit inconsistent. They have some big wins this year. They also have some games they lost. I don't think they should have lost at all. I think when they're playing to the best of their ability, they are easily a top 8 team, a top 2 seed, a 1 or 2 seed in the tournament. Buzz Williams, an electric coach, one of the few guys that still gets all dressed up in a suit, and then he proceeds to sweat through it 5 minutes into the game. Buzz Williams has been legendary since he was at Virginia Tech. Obviously, Wade Taylor, their leader, and I think he's going to have a great tournament, and he's going to try and single-handedly drag them past Auburn into the Sweet 16, assuming Auburn makes it there as well. Low seeds to look out for. First and foremost, UNC, Hubert Davis. It wasn't as close as it was this year, but he made the tournament as an 8 seed a couple years ago. His first year as a coach, made it all the way to the national championship game, seemed to motivate the team. I'm not saying that's going to happen this year, and I'm not trying to overreact to the San Diego State game because I feel like the theme of North Carolina season and the theme that has gotten them to the national point of conversation they are, sometimes they look really, really good and look like that team they were supposed to be coming into the year. And sometimes they look really, really bad. That's why they couldn't beat good teams against those top 5 teams. Now, they did play an incredible out-of-conference schedule. But the reason why I think they couldn't win, again, is just flat-out inconsistency. In those games against those top teams, they'd have stretches where they get outscored 14-2, but then they have stretches where they would outscore them 10-2. So it's like they're going. You never know what UNC team are going to get, but they've been playing much better as of late, especially defensively, and I think that could power this UNC team to make a deep run in the tournament, especially if they can get by Ole Miss. Iowa State's banged up. You know, that's Sweet 16 right there. Let's see what UNC can do. Gonzaga, bad start to the year. Normally, I don't like Gonzaga in the tournament, especially as a favorite. But Gonzaga's been playing really, really well. And now I think they're going to be overlooked a lot. And they're an 8 seed. And they have played well above an 8 seed the last month. I fully expect Gonzaga to give, I believe Houston is the 1 seed. If Gonzaga wins and Houston win and it's a 1-8 matchup, Gonzaga is going to give Houston all their worth and then some. Gonzaga has looked much better as of late. They're very, very experienced tournament players with a very, very tournament experienced head coach. He's done everything in the tournament but win the national championship in Mark Few. Look out for Gonzaga. I think very similarly, Louisville has played better than an 8 seed. I don't know what the committee was thinking, making them an 8 seed. You could say they had an argument for a 5 seed, definitely for a 6 seed. I don't know how Louisville got that low of a seed, but I think it's a crime, and I think it's not talked about enough due to some other things that happened Selection Sunday. They did get put in Auburn's bracket, and Creighton ain't going to make it easy on them in the 8-9 matchup. But I think if everything gets going, this Louisville team is going to be a force to be reckoned with. You gave a good team that has battled through injuries all season a chip on their shoulder. That's a dangerous team to me. Look out for Louisville. UConn, they're obviously not the dominant UConn they have been. Granted, the first championship they won in the back-to-back, they were a 4 seed and didn't look that good either. But Hurley knows what he's doing. And this UConn team can score. I think for this UConn team to make a run, they're going to have to play better defense. But do you really want to play the team that's won the last 2 national titles and feels disrespected in the tournament? I sure as heck don't. And I don't think, though, I believe it's Florida who would be drawing them. I don't think Florida wants to see them that early either. Look out for UConn, especially if they can figure out how to be consistent, especially on the defensive end of the floor. BYU is a team I really, really like. I like their makeup a lot. They have another team that has played in quite a few big games. They're a 6 seed, and I really, really kind of like their quadrant. I think it sets up nice for them to make the second weekend and potentially go deeper. Look out for BYU. And then VCU, the first double-digit, or I guess the second double-digit seed entrance. VCU, Shulga. I want to see a Max Shulga mania take over March Madness. He's an incredible scorer and doesn't get the love he deserves because he's playing in the Atlantic 10 with VCU. But Max Shulga is an elite scorer. He's a great player, and I want to see him have some crazy games and get VCU some love because they've been one of the better mid-major programs of the last decade and a half, and that's even through some coaching changes. University of California, San Diego, I talked about them a little bit already. It's between them and McNeese State, I think, for the best 12 seed. But I think UC San Diego is better suited to make a deeper run. Really, the question is, how does a team that moved up from Division II 5 years ago, this was their first year of eligibility for the NCAA tournament. So there's literally no way for them to have any experience like this. How does the coach adapt to this environment? Can they do it? They have great metrics. They're an incredible offensive team. Usually defense and taking care of the ball is what carries in tournament games. But sometimes if you can get a red-hot offense, throw that out the window because you can just outscore anybody even if they're playing fantastic defense. And I think that's going to be San Diego's key to win, taking care of the ball and scoring a lot of points. Marquette, a 7 seed. Shaka Smart. He's a guy that knows March pretty well. Marquette played a pretty tough schedule. They have some good wins. They have some losses to some great teams. Looked like they were going to take St. John's out in the semis of the Big East until St. John's does what St. John's does and went on a super long run led by the defense. Marquette, man, I wouldn't count them out, especially as that 7 seed based on some of the early math and statistics I talked about. They could be one of those 7 seeds that makes a deep run. Their coach certainly knows how to do it. They still got quite a few good players. Marquette could be dangerous. Xavier, one of the hottest teams coming into the tournament. They sneak into the first 4. 13-point comeback win against Texas tonight, where they looked great. Xavier beats Illinois. I'd start getting really worried that Xavier could make a little bit of a run. They obviously have the star player that every team needs to make the run. Xavier, super hot. They played in a good conference. Look out for them. And then I put them, another team here, maybe the most consistent mid-major team the last 3 or 4 years, the Drake Bulldogs, an 11 seed. Drake can definitely make noise. They win first round over Missouri. I think they can win another game. They've beaten some power conference opponents. I do think some of the power conference games they played haven't necessarily held up as well as the season is going on, but they certainly made an effort to play those guys. They did what they were supposed to do in conference. I like their style of basketball. I don't think they're going to be scared of any team that they play. I think Drake is a potential sleeper, even if they are a commonly picked one that can do damage in this tournament. Okay, I've talked about the sleepers. I talked about the upset picks I'm looking at. I've talked about the math. Now I'm going to actually get into my bracket, who I picked. maybe a little bit of why I picked them. Some of them I'm not going to spend a lot of time on for obvious reasons. Some of them I will. Let's get into my bracket. I have it split up by region, and then I'll do the final four. So first, the number 1 overall seed, Auburn Tigers in the South region. Now, hold your reactions. I know I'm showing you my whole bracket, but I'm talking about this one game at a time. So if you see one team in particular that is surprising you, hold off. I promise I will explain everything. And again, guys, keep in mind, I didn't want to be boring, or I try not to be boring and pick a whole lot of 1 and 2 seeds, even if I think the top of college basketball this year has a very large gap to the middle, more so than it has in a long time. I do believe that, but I also didn't want to be boring, so I tried to pick some things just to not be boring, because I do think this could be a more boring year than normal, especially as the tournament goes on. I think there's a high likelihood there's a lot of 1, 2, and 3 seeds and not a whole lot of anything else. But I digress. Keep that in mind. I'm going to go game by game. Auburn, Alabama State. Alabama State, incredible memory they'll have for a long time. They won a tournament game. That's great for them. They're going to get some more money. Like I said, they have that incredibly memorable. Sorry, I can't talk today. Incredibly memorable Hail Mary pass with 3 seconds left with the layup to win the game after they were trailing most of the time, not by a lot, but they trailed most of that game. It was an incredible game, but they're not going to beat Auburn. Auburn is super deep. They have a whole bunch of seniors and super seniors. They're a lot of experienced college guys. They don't have a weakness on the team other than losing their temper. Auburn should win this one in a blowout. 8-9 matchup. Again, an underseeded Louisville against a good Creighton team. I think Louisville is a better team. They're deeper. I think they have most positions. They have the positional matchup one. But Creighton center, Kalkbrenner, oh boy, he's really, really good. I still think he might be the best center in the NCAA. Incredible defensively, incredible offensively, and I do think Louisville has trouble stopping him, but I think that this could be a really cool contrast of styles, a contrasting styles game. Much like boxing, I think the NCAA tournament is styles make fights, styles make games, and I think that's a very important thing to remember in the NCAA tournament. I think this game is close. It comes down to the wire, and I think Kalkbrenner has a phenomenal game, but I think Louisville being pissed off that they're underseeded, I think they feel disrespected, and I think they make up the whatever Kalkbrenner does. I don't think it's going to be good enough to overcome what Louisville does as a team. I have Louisville winning a close one and going to play Auburn in round 2. I think Michigan and A&M, one of these two teams is losing. I don't know what both of them is. Maybe both of them do, but these are two of the most likely upsets in my mind. Here, I'm hedging my bet. I'm saying it's like I said, I'm guaranteeing at least one of these teams lose. I feel strongly. I really like UC San Diego. I think they're a great story. I think they're a really good team. I don't love the fact they got matched up with Michigan. There's some other 5 seeds I think they match up with better, but I'm still going to pick UC San Diego. I honestly think the Yale upset might be a little bit more likely, especially because of the aforementioned fact that I don't know which A&M team is showing up, but I think A&M and I think Buzz Williams will have them shown up ready to play today, or ready to play for this game. I think A&M beats Yale. I think Yale hangs around for a while, and I think UC San Diego, the magical season continues, and they beat Michigan in the first round. All right, Ole Miss UNC. This is an interesting one. And I was on UNC before the San Diego game to win this one. I said coming into the tournament that UNC is a team I would watch out for. I believe that. However, I think it's almost started to flip where now Ole Miss is the underdog as the 6 seed against an 11 seed. And I think Ole Miss has every right to be upset about that. And I think that might add a couple of points. I do think the UNC is a slightly better team playing pretty well right now, but this game could very well be close. And if UNC, the things I see UNC plaguing UNC in this game is turnovers. If you get the team that turned the ball over a lot, like they did in the first 5 minutes against San Diego State, they're going to lose this game. But also, Ole Miss is a good team, and I think they can definitely score. And what concerns me about UNC, they get a 3-point happy at times, and they made a lot of them last game. And if they come out thinking they're going to do the same thing, they're going to lose. But I think UNC, I agree right with where the line is right now, that they are a slight favorite over Ole Miss. And there's actually some fun familiarity in the backcourt for Ole Miss with UNC. Their backcourt and Brakefield and Padula. Brakefield at Duke, Padula played at Virginia Tech all those years. So UNC is familiar with both of those guys. Both of those guys are familiar with UNC. Maybe that adds a little fun element to this game. I digress. I don't love it because I think I loved it a lot more 2 days ago when North Carolina was public enemy number 1. I don't like it as much now. I think, but I'm like 53% on North Carolina winning this game over Ole Miss and advancing. Iowa State, Lipscomb. I think Lipscomb keeps this game closer than people realize for a little bit. I think they're going to hit some threes. Their offense is going to be working. But even with Iowa State's injuries and Iowa State being banged up, I don't think that Lipscomb will be able to keep it up for a whole game with Iowa State's defensive intensity. And I think Iowa State will get by Lipscomb. Maybe they cover. Like I said, I expect at least a close first half, but Iowa State will advance. Marquette, New Mexico. I think the Mountain West, outside of San Diego State, who did just get absolutely demolished, but they have won San Diego State has won the second most NCAA tournament games out of any team in the nation the last 2 seasons, behind only UConn, who has won the last 2 titles. Outside of that team, the Mountain West has sucked in the NCAA tournament and always underperforms. And I don't think this year is going to be any different. So I think that there's going to be a common theme you will see. I don't want to be too disrespectful to the Mountain West because they are one of the best mid-major conferences. They may be the best. But pretending like they're better than the ACC, I think, is stupid. And I don't see the Mountain West winning as many games. I think Marquette's a little bit underseeded. I think Marquette's a good team. New Mexico, also a good team. They're one of the better Mountain West teams. I don't think they're going to have enough to beat this Marquette team in Shaka Smart. Marquette wins a game that I see being 6 to 10 points. And the Michigan State Bryant. Bryant is not, I repeat, not one of the 15 seeds that I think has any chance to be the 2 seed. There is one that I see happening. If it's going to happen, there's one 15 seed I think that can do it. Remember, it has happened 3 out of the last 4 years. So I'm going to try and pick it. But it's not going to be Bryant over Michigan State. Listen, Tom Izzo, he lives off this whole, glorified thing about him in March. I do think he's overrated in March, but if there's one thing I'll give Izzo credit for, he frequently, when he's a high seed, has his guys ready to go, and they're not going to lose first round most of the time. I don't think Izzo is as good as everybody thinks he is in March. I've never seen somebody live off of one championship 25 years ago as much as Tom Izzo has. Michigan State fans, you can be as angry with me as you want, but at some point, Tom Izzo, he's made so many Final Fours. Yeah, when was the last one? When's the last time Michigan State, Tom Izzo has won the championship? When's the last time they've been to the Final Four? Is it more or less recently than they've suffered a massive upset at the hands of a team they shouldn't have lost to? Go back, do that research, get back to me. Tom Izzo, until further notice, is overrated in March. Still going to win this game against Bryant, though. I'm going to try and get through the rest of these games faster. All right, so I'm about to start talking faster. Hopefully you guys stay with me. Auburn and Louisville. I think Louisville could upset a 1 seed. I don't think Auburn is that 1 seed. Auburn is deep. They have every position. I think Louisville hangs tough. I think Louisville puts a scare in Auburn. Auburn pulls away at the end. Nobody on Louisville's guarding Janai Broome for an entire game. And that's really case closed right there. Louisville keeps it close for most of the game. Auburn pulls away. They're the 1 seed for a reason. A&M over UC San Diego, really enticing matchup. If A&M turns the ball over, they're losing this game. Even to the point where I think they could lose by like 10. That's how good I think San Diego can be, especially if A&M turns the ball over. Again, I like Buzz Williams. I think A&M is ready to go. A&M beats the 12 seed. There's worse things for UC San Diego than winning a tournament game in their first year of eligibility. A&M versus Auburn. A&M, I think, they've beaten Auburn once this year. I think they'd be ready for this game. I actually give Auburn like a 35-40% chance to win, or A&M a 35-40% chance to win if they make it to Auburn. I think A&M this game is close the whole way. I think Auburn learned enough from that last loss to A&M where they don't lose this game. But man, I really, really want to pick Texas A&M, and I love this Sweet 16 matchup if it can happen. North Carolina, Iowa State, contrasting battle of styles, in my opinion. Iowa State can score the ball, but I think largely they are more a defensive physicality team. They're not slow, but they're not fast. They want to control the tempo. North Carolina wants to get out in transition. They want to run. They want to score a lot of points. I love watching contrasting styles in the NCAA tournament. I love watching it in the regular season. Iowa State should absolutely be the favorite here. But like I said, I want to be a little bit different, and I also think North Carolina is playing really well. Iowa State's banged up to injury. While Iowa State's the favorite, I think North Carolina would take care of business in that matchup, making it to the Sweet 16. And look at that, guys. Remember all that math? I have an 11 seed in the Sweet 16, and in the first region, we haven't even seen the other three. Michigan State Marquette, underrated second-round matchup. Marquette could certainly be that 7-2 seed matchup I talk about. I don't think so. I think Tom Izzo has enough to get around Michigan State, setting up a overtime rematch from the Maui Invitational in North Carolina and Michigan State. North Carolina also booted Michigan State out of the tournament last year, so they've split the last two games they've played the last year. And I think North Carolina, against every other 2 seed and every other bracket, would lose a hypothetical Sweet 16 matchup. I don't think they do with Michigan State. I think Michigan State personally is a little bit overseeded. I think North Carolina remembers that overtime defeat in Maui where they were down double digits. They came back to tie it in the second half. Hubert Davis picks up a technical foul. I've really gotten to the research of this game, as you guys can tell. I think North Carolina remembers that, and I think they overcome it, and I think they get revenge on Michigan State in the tournament, sending Michigan State home for the second year in a row and advancing to another rematch of the regular season. It was actually the game before they played Michigan State in Maui against Auburn. But I don't think North Carolina can stop Auburn. They've come a long way defensively. They've come a long way in the paint. Ain't nobody on that team is going to stop Johni Broome all game. And I think that the small backcourt of North Carolina hurts them trying to guard who do you think? Baker Mazara. And good old Georgia Tech transfer Kelly had a pretty good game against them last time. I think he could, again, think the smaller guards of North Carolina and the smaller back or front court of North Carolina runs into trouble in Auburn. They make an Elite Eight run, can't make it to the Final Four, but after how the season looked just a week ago for Carolina, they'd be happy with an Elite Eight run. Auburn going to the Final Four, as everybody predicts. Getting into the West region. I'm going to try and do this one a little bit faster. I'm a little bit behind pace, so sorry if you guys have questions, ask them on Twitter or in the comments below because I need to speed it up. Don't want this video to be 2 hours. Florida over Norfolk State. Obvious, don't need to talk about that one. UConn over OU. UConn has been a little bit more consistent. I think OU, deserving of a 9 seed. They have some big wins, but they also have some losses. I don't think they're that great. I think UConn winning back-to-back titles and having the experience here. UConn beats Oklahoma, setting up a fantastic UConn-Florida matchup. Memphis, I think they're overseeded, and Colorado State is incredibly hot right now. Colorado State might even deserve to be favored in this matchup. But again, maybe it's my anti-Mountain West bias. I think Colorado State has the best chance of any 12 seed to win, but I think Memphis, they've played some good teams. They have a lot of good wins. They're battle-tested. I think Memphis comes out, wins this game over Colorado State, but I think it's an instant classic between two mid-major schools. Maryland and Grand Canyon. I've already talked about both of these schools, so I'm not going to keep repeating myself about stuff I've already said. Maryland over Grand Canyon. Maybe close for a little bit, but I think Maryland wins this one comfortably. Missouri and Drake. I've talked about how much I like Drake. Missouri concerns me with the inconsistency they've shown over the last 2 months. Missouri should win this game. They should be favored, but I like Drake to come out punching, and I like them to be the second 11 seed to upset a 6 seed. in this tournament. Texas Tech, UNCW. I love UNCW. I love the CAA. They're not good enough to beat Texas Tech. Texas Tech is a dark horse title contender. I say that for a reason. Texas Tech over Drake. Drake doesn't have anything for him. I just realized I haven't done the 32 matchup for anybody else. Got excited. And then an incredible quadrant here. Kansas versus Arkansas. Bill Self versus John Calipari, and what everybody expected coming into the year, a 7-10 matchup. I think Kansas wins. Arkansas has some injury issues. I think I will say about Kansas, I don't love the way they're built, and I think when they started losing, it did start hurting that team. It just goes to show you can't buy a roster, you can't buy freshmen, you can't buy a whole bunch of talented transfers. The pieces still have to fit, and I don't think they always do. And I think it's hurt them this year. They have all the talent in the world, but the pieces haven't gone together. I don't think they can win the title. I do think they get by Arkansas first round. And then St. John's, Omaha. If I'm St. John's, I'm worried. Omaha's a really good team. They're very well coached. Look out for the trash cans. If you don't get the reference, just look up Omaha trash cans. It'll come up pretty easily. Omaha, I think, is going to be closer with St. John's than a lot of people realize. I love St. John's defensive effort. Obviously, Rick Pitino, whether you believe he deserved a second chance or not, is still a great coach. I don't think he'll let his Johnnies, his Red Storm lose, but I think Omaha has the best chance to win out of every 15 seed. I told you I'd tell you that. Omaha is my pick. If a 15 seed is going to win, it's going to be them. I'm still going to pick St. John's. Moving over back to the left here, Florida UConn. I think this is going to be an incredibly high-scoring game. Both teams potentially in the 90s or 100s. I think UConn, as a defensive trouble team at times, is going to have trouble stopping Florida, who might be the best offensive team in the country. UConn can also score a lot of points, and I don't think Florida is going to be able to consistently get stops. Whatever the over in this game is, take it. I think Florida moves on just because they're a little bit better defensively, even if this game ends up in the 90s or 100s for both sides. Florida, another number one seed, moving on to the Sweet 16. Maryland, Memphis. Yeah, this is the worst five versus the worst four against the best four. As I said earlier, I don't think Memphis is going to be prepared for Maryland's defensive intensity, and I think I trust Maryland's defense more than Memphis. Maryland moving on to the Sweet 16 for the first time in a while. I already said why I think Texas Tech over Drake. Kansas versus St. John's. I think Kansas has kind of dealt with adversity well, but they've also had some adversity they haven't dealt with very well this year. I think Rick Pitino versus Bill Self is a great coaching matchup, but I don't think Kansas is ready for this defensive intensity that St. John's is going to be bringing, even if I feel like St. John's is the worst 2 seed. I think they have a good draw for the way they play basketball. St. John's over Kansas in a fantastic 7-2 seed game. Texas Tech, St. John's, both of these teams can play defense, but I don't think I trust Texas Tech's offense more than St. John's offense. In a defensive battle, low-scoring game, I think Texas Tech will make enough threes to beat St. John's, move on to the Elite Eight. I think Florida beats Maryland. Maryland has a really good defense, but most defenses have had trouble slowing down Florida this year, even the top ones. Florida over Maryland, and then Florida, Texas Tech. Texas Tech plays really good defense, and they hit a lot of threes. This game is going to be close. In fact, I think I give Texas Tech a decent chance at winning. Like, this is going to be single digits, 3, 5, 6 points, somewhere in there, just a couple possessions. But I think in the end, Florida's offensive prowess will get them the win over Texas Tech. I think if Texas Tech's going to win this game, they need to hit at least 10, 11 threes. They certainly have the guys to do it. It's just about executing. But again, I see Florida winning. Moving on to the East region. I love Mount St. Mary's. They're a great program. I believe this is now their 7th NCAA tournament for one of the smallest schools in Division I. Unfortunately, you're way out of your weight class against Duke. Just wanted to give them the shout out. Duke advancing over Mount St. Mary's. Baylor, a team that's underperformed all year. Mississippi State, a team that's not talked about a lot, but I think is pretty good. And there's a lot of 9 seed over 8 seed upsets. They happen all the time. In fact, Mississippi State lost as an 8 seed last year, and I haven't picked a 9 seed to win yet. I think Baylor might be the most likely 9 seed to win a game, but I'm still picking Mississippi State. I do expect the SEC to way underperform in this year's tournament. I think they only have 5 teams that are actually good enough, that are actually worthy, 5 or 6 teams of all of the consideration that they get. But I think Mississippi State is good enough to beat a struggling Baylor team. Although I will say I trust Scott Drew. He's won a national championship recently for a reason. I don't love picking Mississippi State, but I think they've just been a little bit better and a little bit more consistent than Baylor. And I don't think it matters too much who wins that game because of who they're facing in the next round. More on that coming later. Liberty, if they hit enough threes, they're going to. I definitely think they win the game. I don't know if I trust that. I trust Oregon and Dana Altman a little bit more. Oregon to move on, although Liberty does terrify me as if I'm cheering for Oregon. Arizona Akron, that game doesn't scare me as much. I like Arizona to win this one and somewhat comfortably. BYU VCU. If VCU is playing almost any other 6 seed, I'd pick VCU, but I really like BYU this year for some reason. Something in my gut's telling me to go with them. I think the Mormons will be dancing over VCU. Mormons, BYU, advancing into the round of 32. Wisconsin, you want to talk about an up and down season. Wisconsin has certainly had that. They finished the Big Ten tournament really well. Sets them up to have great momentum going into the tournament. I'm looking at Montana. Sometimes they do some fun things. This isn't that year. Wisconsin moves on against the team that I think is the worst 14 seed in the tournament this year. Vanderbilt and St. Mary's. St. Mary's has had a good year. They've actually gotten the best of Gonzaga, which it feels like it's always those two teams in that conference. Vanderbilt's played in the tough SEC, and I really don't think they can make that deep of a run, but they have some impressive games this year. I think Vanderbilt is ready for the challenge of St. Mary's just because of who the teams have been playing the last 2 months. And I think Vanderbilt ekes out a win over St. Mary's. Sorry, Robert Morris, you don't have a chance. This Alabama team can score. They can score in bunches. And while they don't always play great defense against top-level teams, Robert Morris is not a top-level team. Alabama wins comfortably. Duke, Mississippi State, I already hinted at it. I don't think it matters who wins between Baylor and Mississippi State. I think Duke wins this game, and I think this is where we see Cooper Flagg. If you're Duke, why do you play Cooper Flagg against Mount St. Mary's? If you can't beat them without Cooper Flagg, you don't deserve Cooper Flagg. You don't deserve to advance in the tournament. I think Cooper Flagg makes his return against Mississippi State or Baylor. I think Duke wins it easily again. Duke, last time I checked, is the only team in the top 5 in both offense and defensive efficiency. They're really good. I expect them to make a deep run. Oregon, Arizona, I like Arizona. Not much behind there. I think these teams actually remind me of each other in some ways. I just like Arizona a little bit more for the experience of being in the tournament last year. BYU, Wisconsin. You want to talk about a 6 seed or higher making the Sweet 16? Here it is. BYU over Wisconsin. I'm talking about peaks and valleys with Wisconsin in their season. Here comes a valley. BYU over Wisconsin, sending Wisconsin home. Vanderbilt, Alabama. Man, have we seen that one before? Alabama over Vanderbilt. I think Nate Oates has his boys ready to play. Nate Oates is thinking championship or bust. I'm sure his team is thinking that way. They're deep. They got shooters everywhere. Vanderbilt not going to be able to keep up. And then Alabama over BYU. I think that game is within 10 points. I think BYU can hang tough. They've hung tough with a lot of great teams this year. In the end, they're not going to have enough to get by Alabama. Duke, Alabama is a fascinating matchup. I could see it being very high scoring because even when you play good defense on Alabama, sometimes it doesn't matter. But I see this going like the Florida-Alabama game went in the SEC championship. High-scoring first half, and then Duke's defense finally settles in. Duke's defense is far superior to Alabama's defense. That's the difference in the game. It doesn't matter where you are. Defense travels. Duke over Alabama. Duke into the Final Four. That's 3 1 seeds in the Final Four for you guys keeping track out there, by the way. I hate myself for doing it, but that's how I see it this year. And the final region, the Midwest region. Again, 1 over 16. Nobody shocked. Gonzaga over Georgia. I watched some Georgia basketball. They deserve to be in with their resume, but gosh, I don't think they're actually that good. Gonzaga playing way better. Gonzaga over Georgia in what might be a double-digit game. I think that could be the biggest blowout in the 8-9, the only blowout in the 8-9 seed that I see coming. I really, really like Clemson, but I also really, really like McNeese State. It's very, very hard for me. Very, very hard for me here because I want to pick McNeese State, but I think Clemson is a really darn good 5 seed. I think they might be the best 5 seed. They're definitely better than Michigan. They're definitely better than Memphis. I like Clemson to win McNeese State, but I think McNeese State puts a scare into them, and this is a single-digit game. Purdue and High Point. I actually had High Point picked to beat Purdue until 5 minutes before I recorded this podcast. And then I flipped it to Purdue because I'm like, there can't be that many upsets. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? And I might change it on the thumbnail. I don't know. I'm literally making the decision right now as I'm recording after I made the graphic. So sorry that it doesn't line up. High Point is going to beat Purdue. I believed it most of the week. I flipped it last second. I think High Point is going to be the lone 13 over 4 seed upset and going to be the last of the first round upsets. I actually think the next to last, but High Point over Purdue. I know that says Purdue over High Point. I just changed my mind back. High Point, I'm so in on them, setting up a Clemson High Point second round. I'm sorry, Purdue fans. I know you lose. Other than last year, you lose a lot to double-digit seeds, and I tried to be nice and give it to you this year. I just don't see it happening. High Point over Purdue, making that change on the fly, setting up a battle of the Carolinas in the second round. Xavier over Illinois. Xavier super hot right now. Illinois. They've been waxed a couple times by actual good teams, and that absolutely terrifies me to see that happening that late in the year. I'm picking Xavier over Illinois. They're coming into the tournament hotter, and they're coming into the tournament more consistent. Sorry, Illinois fans. Xavier advancing on. Kentucky, Troy. Troy hangs in there for a little bit. In the end, I think Kentucky's going to be too much, and I don't think they're as upset vulnerable with Mark Pope as they were with John Calipari. UCLA, Utah State. I really, really like Utah State. They honestly might be the best Mountain West team in my eyes. And UCLA has struggled at times this year. They're another one of those teams that's up and down and up and down. That's why they're a 7 seed instead of a 4 seed. I think UCLA comes into the tournament ready to play. Mick Cronin has made a Final Four run with this UCLA team. He's been good with UCLA in the tournament, and I think UCLA escapes with a narrow victory over Utah State. Wofford. For the last 10 years, they've been one of my favorite mid-major teams. They've made had quite a few fun games in the tournament that have been super close. I don't know if they actually pulled off the upset in any of them. Maybe one time I lost where I had it written down on my notes, so I apologize. But Wofford is a really, really fun team. They don't have anything for Tennessee. Tennessee over Wofford. Houston Gonzaga. I think out of all the 8 or 9 seed versus 1 seed, this is the one that I'm most confident that the 8-9 seed is able to pull off an upset. I was so close to picking Gonzaga, and normally I make fun of them for choking in March, but they usually don't choke in the round of 32. I really, really, really wanted to pick the Zags. I just think Houston is just a little bit too good, and they've been just as consistent, and they're playing at the same level, really above the level that Gonzaga's been playing, even though Gonzaga's been playing really well. I have Houston narrowly winning this game, but boy, do I think the Zags are keeping it close and potentially leading for good portions of that game. Remember, I changed my mind. This is High Point Clemson. Well, you don't need to remember anymore. I think Clemson beats High Point. High Point gets to the tournament, gets the win, but I think Clemson is too good of a team to get upset, to have that big of an upset happen to them. Clemson, Houston, can Clemson make Elite Eight in back-to-back years? I don't think so. I think it's close. I think this game is low scoring. As I said, Clemson can play a lot of different schedules, but Houston, man, they have experience. They're ready to win a championship. Clemson over Houston. Or no, Houston over Clemson. I think that game's close, though, and low scoring. Doesn't get out of the 60s. Kentucky beats Xavier. Xavier's luck stops. I don't really have a lot to say about that one. I just think Kentucky's the better team, and they are playing well enough. Tennessee is going to shut down UCLA, everything they do. Tennessee is just a better team than UCLA. In a rematch of Kentucky-Tennessee, I really give it a 50-50 coin flip, but I'll take the 2 seed. I want to see Tennessee finally make the Final Four, and because of that, in a phenomenal defensive battle, I see Tennessee beating Houston in a very low-scoring game to advance to the Final Four for the first time in school history. If you're keeping track, that is 3 1s and a 2 seed moving on to the Final Four. I know it's kind of chalky. I just think that the very top of the NCAA this year is a little bit better than the middle, more so than in previous years, which is why I see it being a little bit more chalk. But again, 3 1s and a 2. if you're keeping track. And 4-1s have made it like once in like 30 years last time I checked. So it's very rare that all 4-1s make the Final Four. And I don't think this is going to be the year. I do think there's some 2 and 3 seeds good enough to stop that, even if it doesn't pan out exactly how I say. However, let's look at the Final Four. I haven't shown you my Final Four or who I pick for it. So here's the big reveal. And again, I'll talk about each game. Auburn versus Florida. These teams have played a couple of times, huh? Auburn's coming in a little bit slow, and it really scares me that they're coming into the tournament this slow. They've lost three of the last 4 coming into the tournament. Obviously some controversy with some things that have happened, technical fouls and flagrant fouls and things of the such, ejections. I still think Auburn, when playing to the best of their ability, is one of the 2 best teams in the country. Bruce Pearl, outside of one Final Four run, I don't trust to make deep runs, and he hasn't made deep runs outside of one season. But Florida has even less history under the current head coach. Obviously, Florida has won some championships and has been to the Final Four as recently as 2014. Another great game between SEC teams. It's funny, I think I said the SEC is going to underperform, but here I have 3 of the 4 final teams. Again, I think the SEC has a good top 4 or 5 teams, but I think after that, the conference is severely overrated. So I think after that, they begin to lose some games. Anyway, Auburn and Florida, both of these teams can score. Both of them are going to score. I don't think there's too much separation in defense, honestly. I just like Auburn's depth a little bit more than Florida's. This is almost a toss-up 50-50 game. I think Auburn would and should be slightly favored, and I think Auburn narrowly wins this game. Duke and Tennessee. I think Duke's defense is a little bit better. I think Duke's offense is a little bit better. And I think Cooper Flagg stays healthy the whole tournament. Ankle sprains suck. You can re-aggravate them, but I think they're also something you can play through. And when it's going to be big time, I think Cooper Flagg is going to be able to play through and will play through. And I don't think Tennessee can match Duke on offense or defense consistently. I think this game is close throughout, but I think Duke gets this win by like 5 to 10 points. Tennessee still having a good season. I don't think many people expected them to make the Final Four after losing what they did from last year's team. They make the first Final Four in school history, losing to a blue blood in Duke. Now, Auburn versus Duke, the 2 best teams all year. They've actually played. Duke beat Auburn, and that makes me very nervous to pick Duke to beat Auburn. I really thought Auburn was going to win when I was doing research, and usually in the rematches of games that have already happened, I like to pick the loser in the second game because there seems to be something to they figure it out the second game, right? You want to get revenge. I think what separates Duke from a lot of the other top teams, now Houston has it, but I don't think Houston has the offense. I think a lot of these top teams have a great offense outside of Tennessee and Houston, but Duke's effort on the defensive floor is otherworldly. Duke is also like the tallest team in Division I. They start 2 7-footers. Their starting point guard is tall. Their starting shooting guard is tall. They're a very tall team. They shoot the 3 ball well. They have really no weaknesses. They excel at so many things. Top 5 in offense. They're a top 5 offensive and defensive team. And while I really want to pick Auburn over Duke because I really, really like I said, picking the loser in the rematch, the loser of the first game in the rematch, I think Duke has just figured something out. I know they took 2 early losses. They lost to a good Clemson team on the road in conference play. And outside of that, that's it. This Duke team is deep. This Duke team is good on both ends of the floor. And I trust them a little bit more than Auburn to be consistent on both ends. I think Duke beats Auburn in the championship, giving them title number 6 and tying their arch rivals from 7 miles up the road in North Carolina for 3rd most all time and breaking the tie that they've had with UConn and a couple other teams. Thank you guys for taking time out of your days and weeks for listening. I know this was a super long episode, and I know it's coming out not too much time, less than 12 hours before the tournament. But like I said, I wanted to see the first 4 matchups happen. This is probably, now that I'm looking at the recording time, going to be the longest episode in podcast history. I hope you guys enjoy. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I want everybody that listens, I want to see your picks. March Madness brings everybody together. It's arguably the best postseason in all of sports. So everybody that listens, I want your hot takes about March Madness, your sleepers, your upset picks, your national champions, your final four. Put all that in the comments below. If you listen, I want to see a comment. Please like. Again, I hope you listened to the whole thing. I try not to run on too much. Sorry if you think that I did. Anyways, I digress. Take care of yourself. Watch a lot of basketball these next 3 weeks. Have a good rest of your week. Peace out.